located in 100. We're located in 100 cities across the United States and in 80 markets at the U.S. embassies and consulates. And wherever we don't have our own commercial section at the U.S. embassies and consulates, we work with the State Department to offer our services. So our bread and butter, our whole reason for being is to support U.S. businesses and helping them grow their international sales and export so you can grow U.S. jobs. We do this in a variety of ways. First of all, we offer various different services, including export counseling, where we work with you to help you understand the lay of the land in a particular market. As I mentioned, I have colleagues located in different markets, so they can offer kind of hands-on in-market purview of what's going on in a particular sector or whatever your focus area is. We also offer market intelligence, which is what I'm basing our presentation today off of. We have what's called our country commercial guides that are readily available information for you to look at regarding kind of the best practices, best prospects, some of the considerations on the legal side, cultural, finances for particular markets. We can also do additional due diligence for you in markets. So we could actually conduct background checks, obtain information and feedback from potential partners on a customized basis. So that's another thing to keep in mind in terms of market intelligence. We also provide business matchmaking. So we can connect you with pre-screened potential partners. What we're best known for is our Gold Key service, where we actually can organize a business meeting agenda for you in a particular market and set up those meetings in person and actually go with you to those meetings. And finally, we dive into the space of commercial diplomacy. We can address various different trade obstacles for you as you enter into new markets. We can work in coordination with other foreign governments to really protect and advance U.S. business interests. So for example, if you're bidding on a project in Canada that's by the Canadian government, we can actually advocate on your behalf through our advocacy center as well. So at the end of the day, we're here to kind of be your advocate and your support in different markets. With our global network, we have a really big reach. And so hopefully we can work with you as you enter into the Canadian market. Next slide, please. So I kind of dived into some of this information already in terms of export counseling. We will take, for example, the information we shared today and can apply it to your company in particular. So if any questions come up from today's webinar, we're happy to take a deeper dive and see how it might relate for your business. I also wanted to mention that we have, especially after COVID and during COVID and after COVID, really ramped up our digital service counseling as well through our e-commerce innovation lab. So if you're a company with an online presence trying to establish sales channels through various different online marketing strategies, we're here to help you understand what the best strategy might be for a particular market. We can actually offer a website globalization review where we're looking at your website, giving you feedback as to how to best apply it to get a larger reach of foreign buyers or whoever your target market might be. And then we have a list of business service providers that can actually help you implement some of those best practices that we may offer you. So that's something to keep in mind as well. I won't go too in depth about that in this particular presentation, but something to just note that we do work in that space as well. So next slide, please. Market intelligence. There might be a lag for the presentation, so I'm just going to continue talking. Hopefully you can see the screen as well to follow along. But the next slide should be the market intelligence slide. And I have already dived into some of this, but as I mentioned, we have our country commercial guides, really good information readily available on our website that helps you better understand what's going on in a particular market of interest. So as I mentioned already, a lot of the information I pulled today for our presentation on Canada actually came from the Canadian Country Commercial Guide. And these are written and updated by our teams on the ground who have, again, access to the latest information, who are seeing on the ground what's going on. So hopefully you can use that as well as a resource to help guide your export strategies and market entry strategies.
Hey, Ruth, I just want to let you know, our slides are keeping up with you, so we're fine on our end. And I did put the...
Okay, it's probably just my computer then.
Yeah, and I did put the Country Commercial Guide for Canada in chat for everybody, but please continue. Thank you.
Excellent, Tom. Thank you so much. You're one step ahead of me. So yeah, I'm not going to look at my screen because, of course, my computer is being very moody and giving me all sorts of trouble. So thank you so much for letting me know. All right, so I mentioned as well some of the customized market research that we could do for your company. And this is our initial market check service, where if you have a particular product or service you're trying to, in a sense, test out in a particular market, you can actually gather feedback from industry participants and provide recommendations on whether or not to pursue that target market. So if you're looking at the Canadian market very seriously and want to get some feedback before you enter in, this is something we can offer you and support you. And so any of these services where we're doing customized service, there is a user fee mandated by Congress. For small companies, it is minimal. It changes depending on the size of the company. But for example, the initial market check, which is $350 for small companies, if you decide to then, if you get enough positive feedback from that market and those industry participants, we can then kind of upgrade that service to a business matchmaking service. In the next slide, please. As I mentioned, our Gold Key service, or maybe a virtual international partner search, where we connect you with potential overseas agents, distributors, sales representatives, business partners, and other local in-country entities at a kind of discounted rate. So that's something to keep in mind as well. I won't go into too much more depth in terms of the business matchmaking services. One thing I did want to mention is our single company promotion service. So if you're entering in a new market and you want to make a big splash with an event, we can help you in actually delivering that promotional event, whether or not it's a conference or maybe a luncheon or a reception at the ambassador's residence, for example. That's another service that we can support you with to, again, help you put your best foot forward in a particular market.
Hey, Ruth, we have a couple questions. Somebody asked, they said they're not yet a citizen of the U.S., but they are a permanent resident. Are they able to work with commercial services?
Sure. So if your company is 51% or more U.S. made, so whatever you're exporting into a particular market, if it meets our U.S. content requirements, we can work with you. So I work with, for example, a Canadian company actually that moved their manufacturing from Canada here to the Greater Phoenix region. And even though they're not U.S. citizens, since their manufacturing is being done here in the U.S., we're able to support them as they utilize the U.S. as an export platform.
And another question, I'm aware of it. Are people able to utilize STEP grants to help offset the cost of your services?
Yes, thank you so much for mentioning that. So the SBA has, for those not familiar with it, the State Trade Expansion Program, STEP for short. So each state applies for this program, and the state of Arizona has this program available through the Arizona Commerce Authority to help essentially offer reimbursement on some of your export expenses. So yes, the Arizona Commerce Authority can, they may offer some reimbursement for our service fees. There is a process. You would need to connect with Kevin O'Shea at the Arizona Commerce Authority, go through their application process, and depending on the funds, they do also have criteria listed for which, what they're able to support you with or not. For example, they could do, if you participate in, if you do a gold key, for example, in a market like Honduras, they can potentially reimburse up to 75% of the cost of the gold key or in your expenses for travel, potentially. But they do also have offices in various different markets. So I know, for example, in Mexico, if you were to request a gold key service there, they would probably not reimburse you for that because they have an office there. And that's something, worth noting as well is you have our services. You also have great resources through the Arizona Commerce Authority if you're an Arizona-based company to help you in similar fashion with business matchmaking meetings. They have offices in Arizona at this point, Israel just opened, Taipei, South Korea, they're in Germany. So, a few markets, I would say, I guess one of the big differentiators is that we're in many, many more markets. And, really, there's a lot of power behind being associated with the U.S. Embassy and consulate, but certainly also great resources at the state level that you should take advantage of. Any more questions, Tom?
Not right now.
Okay, great. Well, I love this. I love that it's more interactive. So please share any additional questions in the chat, and I'm happy to continue addressing them as we go. So next slide, please. All right, so trade events. This is another opportunity area for you to work with our team. So we have many, many different trade missions. We're in many, many different trade shows where we're actually setting up business matchmaking meetings for U.S. companies. We recruit foreign buyers to particular shows. We actually offer our counseling services at shows as well. These are organized by industry, so oftentimes, or by jurisdiction, by geographic location for some of the trade missions. But most frequently, we do organize them by industries. So it just depends on which industry your company falls under. Again, I cover certain industries. I cover energy, environmental tech, information communication, technology, and education. But I have many colleagues that cover all the other kind of top sectors for the service. So those are some of the ways that you can get involved. And depending on your sector, again, I'm happy to kind of point you in the right direction. We have what's called our global teams, our global industry teams, our global teams based off of geographic regions as well that are putting together various different programs virtually now, a lot of them given COVID, and in person again. Again, participating in trade shows, trade missions, but also other webinars like this one. And so happy to share more information about those depending on what your sector is again and what your interests are. I did want to mention also our flagship programs. So Discover Global Markets is our US-based flagship program where we bring foreign buyers from different markets and our commercial diplomats from abroad to meet with companies on one-on-one basis. This last iteration took place in Rhode Island. It was really focused on the blue economy. And next year, this year, we'll be breaking these up in different regions across the US. So that's something to keep in mind. You really don't have to go too far from home to tap into that resource. And then TradeWinds. So I'm still recovering from jet lag from traveling to Thailand a couple weeks ago, but TradeWinds. And TradeWinds is our largest trade mission. So we took this past iteration 100 companies to Thailand to participate in a business forum, which consisted of one-on-one meetings with our commercial service diplomats, with other businesses. We had different plenary sessions, including a keynote by the Prime Minister of Thailand. And then we also offered different mission stops for companies to do mini gold keys, if you will. So kind of that business matchmaking meeting service in a few different markets in the region. And next year, TradeWinds will be going to Turkey and the Western and Central Asian region for the mission stop. So that's another really good opportunity. That trade mission is horizontal. So it doesn't matter which industry you fall under, you can apply for that. And because it's so large, it does get a lot of attention and resources. So definitely a good opportunity. All right, so just one more slide on our services, commercial diplomacy, and I'm really just gonna touch really briefly on this because I already talked about it. But again, we're there to advocate on your behalf as the US government in working with other governments. So that's just something to, again, keep in mind. If you ever come across an issue, let us know as soon as possible and we can see how we might be able to support you. All right, so now to the Canada market overview, the reason why we're all here. Next slide, please. All right, so a little bit about Canada. Canada is the second largest in the world in terms of location and size. So you can see the square mileage is very, very large. The population is 39.3 million last year, which is the latest numbers we have. And we have a very close relationship with Canada, given we have the world's longest border. We share the world's longest border with them. That's over 5,000 miles with 126 land ports of entry. The capital of Canada is Ottawa, Ontario, not to be mistaken with Toronto or some of the other better known cities in Canada. Their Prime Minister is Justin Trudeau, and they do not only speak English as an official language, they also have French as an official language. The United States and Canada really enjoy a very robust and comprehensive trading relationship. It supports millions of jobs in each country and constitutes a $1.7 trillion bilateral trade and investment relationship. Canada is and has been traditionally the top US export market, accounting for 17.5% of all US good exports in 2021. Just a few more key facts about the trading relationship. In 2021, Canada became that top trading partner for the US. And in terms of, as a top market, 31 US states rank Canada as their #1 export market. Here in Arizona, that's not the case. It's actually second to Mexico, which I know my colleague Fernando and the rest of the team here will be diving into a little bit more deeply in your next webinar. So another kind of key fact point that I think is kind of interesting is the US exports to Canada actually in 2021 exceeded the total US exports to China, Japan, India combined. So whether you're a first time or seasoned exporter, Canada is a really good market and should be a key component of your company's export growth strategy. So in terms of the Canadian economy, you can see some of the facts and figures here on this slide. Really large GDP, 2.2 trillion, which is the eighth largest in the world, according to the IMF, with a positive growth outlook of 1.5%. The unemployment rate reasonable at 5% as of February 2023, and the currency at $1 to $1.37 Canadian dollars as of March 16th. Next slide, please. Some of the top industry sectors for U.S. exporters are aerospace and defense, the agriculture sector, automotive, and there's a really large automotive trade show that takes place in Toronto every year that we have a presence at. There's the defense equipment, energy is another kind of key sector, information and communication technologies, and medical devices. And on the energy front, it's not just the traditional oil and gas, but also now a renewable energy industry growth that we're seeing. There's a lot more great information that you can dive into about each particular sector as part of that country commercial guide, which you can see here the link to, and that Tom also graciously added to our chat. Next slide, please. So we offer, so the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, we have as I mentioned, a very strong relationship, trade partner relationship, and a privileged trading partnership agreement for U.S. companies. In 2020, July 1st, USMCA replaced NAFTA, which was the original trading partnership agreement that we had between U.S., Mexico, and Canada. USMCA at this point is 21st century high standard trade agreement supporting mutually beneficial trade results in freer markets for fair trade and robust economic growth in North America. I want to point out some of the kind of key points of USMCA that might apply to your company. Canada, as part of USMCA and the NAFTA 2.0 update, all products that have zero tariffs under NAFTA remain at zero under USMCA, and Canada has provided new and expanded access via the tariff rate quotas for U.S. exporters of certain dairy categories as part of USMCA. USMCA no longer requires a NAFTA certificate of origin. There is an updated USMCA certification that is what I hear more user-friendly. It just has 9 data elements and can be provided in different forms. There are the de minimis threshold that sets the value of goods below which no duties or taxes are collected by customs has been expanded. So shipments up to these de minimis values will generally enter with minimal formal entry procedures. So I think the point here is that Canada does offer for U.S. companies, thanks to USMCA, I don't want to say easier, but a kind of a more streamlined approach for exporting into foreign markets. And it's something that for you to take a look at as you enter in the Canadian government, or Canadian market. We do have a lot of great resources to help break down some of these kind of topic areas that I discussed. We have a USMCA website that kind of goes over the general facts about USMCA. You can find here the FTA tariff tool where you can look up and determine how each US FTA partner is likely to classify its goods, as well as any kind of applicable preferential tariff rate. So there's a robust tool here that you can use for the Canadian market. And then there's some great resources as well in terms of for small businesses and exporter checklist and resources that are related to USMCA. You can find there with that link. And I can also share those links in the chat just in case the URLs aren't working. But I think, at the end of the day, it's being aware of these tools that you can utilize as you enter new markets, in particular in Canada, where we again have this a very strong trading relationship that you could take advantage of. Next slide, please. Okay, so now getting into the actual process of entering into the Canadian market. So I just wanted to go over some kind of key considerations for you as you look at the Canadian market. And first of all is research. Know the market. Depending, whether or not we're right next door to them, there's still some major differences between Canada and the US. And so doing your due diligence, developing a market entry strategy, working with Tom and the folks here at SBDC to develop this market strategy is very, very important. The strategy, whether you decide to go through e-commerce or actually find distributors, this can, again, it's your first foot in the door, and so it's very important that you are strategic about it to help you maximize in the success and minimize any sort of risk. I would also, urge you to collect information about the industries you plan. So even though you might be in the mining sector, you might be actually targeting, automotive or whatever it is. So understanding the sectors that you're going to be tapping into, the customers and consumers you want to sell to, and who your competition is in the market. So as I mentioned, these are things that we can support you with as well. And so you can take a look at some of those kind of links and opportunities there listed. Next slide, please. It's really important to understand the regulatory environment as well. So even though we have USMCA, we have this sort of privileged trading partnership with Canada, you might be required to have certain export permits from the US. There are also some prohibited items for import into Canada. So being aware of those is really important. And the best approach for this is really to look at what it is you are trying to sell and see, okay, is there anything I should be aware of for this particular product? There are different import regulations, permits, licenses, and quotas. Again, also certifications and standards you might have to be aware of and adapt to. So again, that really it really depends on what the product is. And so taking that approach and looking into that is really important. Next slide, please. So other market requirements for Canada, other considerations are the duty and tax requirements at the border to the Canada Revenue Agency. We have a tool on our website as well through the Country Commercial Guide where you can link to see a Canadian Import Authority has resources where you can take a look at what those are. There are also marking and labeling requirements. And again, even though lots of us, understand Canada is speaking English, they also might have bilingual labeling requirements in French. So being aware of that is also very important as you export your products. Next slide, please. Another consideration is protecting your intellectual property. So depending on what your product is, even though, again, Canada is right next door, all IP is local. So you would have to develop an overall intellectual property strategy to protect your IPs in Canada that are different than in the US. If you have a trademark in US, it would not apply in Canada. So again, all intellectual property rights are local, and so you have to be registered and figure out the enforcement in Canada under the local laws. We do have a lot of resources available for that as well. through the U.S. Department of Commerce, USPTO, the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. They have a group of IP attaches located in various different parts of the world that can help counsel you on these topics and help you understand, how you go about registering to protect your IP in a particular market. So, and then stopfakes.gov is a website we have that is very useful as well to help you understand kind of patent, trademark, and copyright issues. So even though it's Canada, we're right next door, that's something you should definitely consider as well. Next slide, please. All right, so I think this is the last slide, but I just wanted to summarize this by, again, think Canada, but be careful. Of course, we all know Canada as being a very friendly market, they speak English. We often sometimes might think that there are more similarities than differences, which may very well be the case, but there are some business culture differences to consider. So that's something that, for any market that you enter, you should always keep in mind. There is a different geography and climate. The exchange rate may fluctuate. And like the United States, Canada is very diverse. So the localizing your strategy, so figuring out, okay, if I want to enter into Quebec, how is that different than entering into Alberta, for example? I do want to mention that we have offices throughout Canada. So we're not just located in Ottawa, we're in Toronto, we're in Ottawa, we're in Vancouver, we're in Calgary. So we can support you with that kind of local approach as well. So with that, I think that's the end. Yep. So with that, I'm happy to share my contact information. I'm happy to help connect you with if I'm not the right person for you to work with, I'm happy to connect you with any of my colleagues to support your exports into Canada. I'm happy to answer any questions, if there are any additional ones.
Well, let's give it a second, see if any questions are put in chat. Ruth, I also put your email in chat, so people have that. But
great, thank you.
Yeah, any questions for Ruth before we talk about some other logistics considerations? Please place them in chat. Working with the Commercial Services Group is always phenomenal. I know in my career I've been able to take advantage of Gold Key and some of those others. So programs, but any questions? If you come up with questions, feel free to post them. And I'm not sure I understood that particular question. How do we access counseling? So we'll talk about that a little bit at the end, but there's a couple types of counseling here we're talking about. There's SBDC, and we'll provide you that link so that, as Ruth said, you can work with your counselor at the SBDC to kind of prepare in advance on some of how it fits into your total business outlook, and we can work with you on that and help connect you with U.S. Commercial Services. But also, you can go, Ruth, just to the U.S. Commercial Services website. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would actually point you, since they're Arizona companies, point you to our trade.gov/Arizona Phoenix, so that you can. I would be happy to help make that introduction. If you go to our contact us, sometimes it feels like a huge vacuum. So I wouldn't want you to get stuck in that vortex. I'm happy to connect you with the right counselor. As I mentioned, we work in key industries. And so just depending, the person who would be your point of contact for counseling would be the one covering your sector. So again, I'm happy to help you figure out who that is. But yeah, I mean, I think SBDC, working with them very closely as well is great. We certainly together can help you in a much better way than if you were to just come to one of us.
Okay.
And then when it comes to actually going to Canada, happy to help connect you with the right resources there.
All right, perfect. So we do have a couple other questions, but I'm going to kind of hold those because we want to make sure we get other content in, but some things about your minimums and things like that. But I'll bring those up in a little bit. But first, I want to go ahead and move to our next presenter. So there we go. Next presenter is Carol Lazier-Poole. Carol is with the SBDC, and she is a certified global business professional by NASBITE, one of 3 that we have at the SBDC around the state. She has an MBA from the University of Amsterdam. I feel so boring compared to Carol and Ruth that I went to Arizona State and Denver, nothing fancy like all these international degrees. She has 14 years of international trade experience and a Master of World Trade Incoterms. Basically, she is, has all the goods if you need help with understanding export. So I'm going to turn it over to Carol, who's going to talk to you a little bit more about some of the documents and logistics on exporting to Canada.
Okay, thank you so much, Ruth, for helping us this morning. If you feel my talking is boring, you're welcome to log out. I'm so sorry. So let's start talk about export documents. One of the most common questions I got after I joined SBDC from my clients, do I need an export license? So the 90% of the US products, when they export, they don't need export license. There is a place you can check out by yourself. Of course, if you're not so sure after you checked yourself, you can always come back to us and then we can go deeply study together with you. Check with the US Department of Commerce Bureau of Industry and Security. Here's the link. And after today's presentation, we will send you out the PDF version so you can work on it. So this is the commercial control list. So there's like once you get online on their website, you can see that they have a category list and you have the product group. And if your product or your service fell into any of this, you can just click it, get started deeper to see if you're there. Sometimes there's a gray area. It's like, oh, yes or no, I'm not so sure about this. In general, for the dual use product, you need export license. I'll give you an example. If you have a chip or software, which you can use for commercial, you also can use on a weapon. So for that product, or for that app, you normally use the export license in order to export it. So this is very general. It's not only applied to Canada, it's applied to other countries as well. Again, go to this website and you can check it out yourself first. For the export documents to Canada, I'm talk about products, not service. Because when you export a service, for example, you're a software engineer, when you do a service to a Canadian company, you are exporting. You're exporting your service, but these documents are not applied to you. These documents are applied to the real products, some physical product which you can touch. Okay, it's very simple. Sorry, I don't know why it's called the rank is wrong. The number is wrong. It should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The first one you need is a bill of lading, and that is basically your freight forwarder or your logistics company is going to provide to you. I have examples later on. I will show you. The other one is certificate of origin. Under the USMCA, the latest version, the exporters, producer, and importers, all of these parties are allowed to issue the certificate of origin. And they have the minimum request to describe your products and then to confirm the region of the, the origin of the products on the certificate. Again, I have an example later, I will show you. And then the third document they need is a commercial invoice, which need to list all the products you're going to export and then just give them a dollar-wise value. And then a packing list is required when you cross the border. And the next document is the COA, is certificate of analysis. This is optional because not every single product need have a certificate of analysis. This is most applied to agriculture product. For example, you export some peas or you export some sorghum or soybeans to Canada by truck. You may need a certificate of analysis to show what the product is. When the trucks cross the border, this is not something critical. Like the customers, I would say the Canadian customers will not ask for this. However, later on, if they figured out, hey, I'm going to double check if this product is indeed the same as what you declared, they will ask you give a backup document. So this is certificate of analysis. I put an option there, just let you know that it's not every single product needed. Let's go to the examples. Here is a very, I would say like simple bill of lading from one of the transportation companies. I deliberately to take off the broker's name and the shipper's name, but just you see this is a bill of lading provided by a Canadian transport company when they transport the product from the US to Alberta as a Canadian. So what they need to cover on this bill of lading is they need to provide the shipper's name. You have broker, you may not have broker. So this is not a critical part, but you need to make sure you have the shipper name and the address, and then you see the net weight. I mean, of course, this is for agriculture product. If you are just ship something by a cube or by a box, you don't need to have a net weight, but you need to have like the package weight or like the cube meters or something like that, square footage. And then you need to have the consignee information here. So the consignee can be the end user you are selling, or can be a middleman, a translator is here. So this is an example of the bill lading. You may need it, you will need it when you export from US to Canada. And then, I mean, this is just an example, okay? You can do yourself. You can make it by yourself, make a fancy one. A lot of I would say transportation companies are providing this kind of service. If you don't want to do it yourself, you can ask your freight forwarder to make one for you. Here's the example of the certificate of origin. This one is the example I got from a chamber. By the way, as far as I know, most of the chambers of commerce here, local, they are providing this kind of certificate origin. If you don't know how to make it yourself, you can go to chamber and get a copy. They can even stamp it here at the bottom. They can stamp it for you. So for this certificate origin, you need to fill out the shipper's name, exporter, and the consignee. You can put the two order, or you can put in the real receiver, like the buyer or logistic companies. And then here, intermediate consignee is notified party. Can be your can be the freight forwarder, can be the transloading. This is the optional part. And then you need to put like the bill of lading number here. Export reference optional, and then this forwarding agent. This is also optional. You don't have to do it, but if you want to put your contact information there, you can. And then here have also like exporting carrier, port of loading, and then transportation method here can truck, train. I don't think you will use container, but if you do, you can see here by sea. And then here, the containers, serial number, marks of numbers, marks and numbers. Here you can put a truck number plate here, or you can put your trailers numbers here and the number of package. I mean, you just fill in all the informations by the I would say the nature of the products. Okay. And that if some company may need you to have a third party certified certificate of origin, and then you can go to the chamber, ask them to put a stamp here for you that is official, or you can just do yourself under the new I would say regulation or new trade agreement between the US, Canada, and America. As an exporter or producer, you can do it yourself. You can just simply send here. But this, as I said, this one is an official one. It works for most of the companies. You can just go to the chamber, get a stamp here. So this is an example of a packing list. So when you prepare a packing list, there's a minimum information you put there. Is you need to have a contract number, invoice number, from who, exporter, to who. And here is the minimum number information you need to put on the packing list. You need to have a description of the product. You need to have the quantity, and you need to have a gross weight, net weight, or measurement. So the purpose for packing list is just for the customers to verify the products on your truck is the same as what you are describing, what you are exporting, or what you are reporting to the customers. Okay, so this is all about the documents. If you have any questions, please put in the chat. Our next webinar is April 26th. We are going to talk about how to export to Mexico. Tom?
Yeah, and thank you. So we did have one question, Ruth, that was someone had asked, is there like a minimum size or that company should be before they're coming to you? In other words, if they're sending a few things through Canada Post, it's $1,000 or something. Is that worth coming to, or at what point should they approach commercial services for help?
No, it's not so much the size that really matters. It's more export readiness. So that's determined by, we ask many questions regarding, are you already an established business in the United States? Do you have a product or service ready to go to export to Canada? And so, that's another area where if perhaps your export readiness isn't quite there, perhaps working with SBDC or others can help get you there. So no, again, not in terms of size, but yes, in terms of export readiness.
Perfect, thank you, Ruth. So yes, and we have an export readiness tool that we've developed, and I think we are in the process of updating a little bit that we'll share with, Ruth will share it with you and make available to our clients, potential clients for that very purpose. And I think Carol covered some important topics about the export license, because it's one of those, Carol, you never know. For example, do you know that you need an export license to export horses to Canada if you're exporting them via sea? It doesn't apply if you're flying them in or driving them in, although there's a limit. So there's some funny things in there. I remember working with a client that was exporting paraffin and was shocked that they had to have a license. Well, that's because paraffin can be used in rocket fuel, explosives, weaponry, and a lot of other things. So things that seem simple may not always be. So it's important to get that input and advice. So we're going to tell you a little bit about some of our additional services. And Carol, if you can go ahead and.
You can do it.
Perfect, thank you. So if you are not already working with the SBDC, please go to this link and request counseling. So you'll see something that says request counseling on the page. All counseling is done by appointments. Where our process works, you have an initial session with your counselor where you're identifying business goals, maybe you do a support plan for the year, and then you'll have follow-up sessions with that same counselor. And then, of course, we are tracking your business goals, and we're also doing reporting to the SBA of things like jobs created, businesses started, export capital or capital generated, and sales growth. All that is done confidentially, but it helps us tell the SBA why the SBDC is so valuable to them and continue to be able to provide services to you. You can reach me or Carol directly at these emails, and we're happy to hear from you. Just know if you are not a client and you contact us and want to get advice, we are going to send you that link to sign up to request counseling. And then, but we can help you through that process. And that's really it. As Carol said, please join us again in April 26th. We'll be covering Mexico, and we'll have with us Fernando Jimenez from the U.S. Commercial Services. We'll also have Carol joining us, and we have a special guest from a company called Giaz Global. They are a freight forwarder with a lot of operations in Mexico, so they'll give us some additional small business insight. One other guest we're going to have on that one is Ex-Im Bank, Export-Import Bank in the United States, talking a little bit about their services for 5 minutes. So that'll be a great one. And with that, Karen, is there anything else we needed to cover before we let people go?
No, I think that we are good. There may be a time change on that next class. I believe we are moving it to 3 o'clock.
Correct. It's 3 to 4:15 p.m.
Okay, so currently it's scheduled from 10 to 11, and due to scheduling challenges, we had to move it to 3 o'clock. So I just want everyone to be aware of that. If you want to reach out to me to get the slide deck from this presentation, my email is, let me type it right here, karen.linthicum@dumail.maricopa.edu. I can't type and talk at the same time. And this recording will be available on our website under training and then recorded webinars. And give me till tomorrow to get that up and going. We probably have some things to cut out of this. So just let me know if you have any questions.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We'll look forward to seeing you soon.
All righty.
Thanks so much, Tom.
Thanks, Ruth. Good to hear from you.
Likewise. Thanks.
Bye.